Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Honestly guys, I don't know if I want to keep that intro because it's been part of this channel for so long, but I want to pivot. I want to do a 360 degrees turn. I want to start doing something a little different on this channel. Oh my god, did you hear my tongue touch the can you? Anyway, I want to start doing something a little bit more, something more thought-provoking. Since I got my master's in law, I have some thoughts that I'd like to share with all of you. And so without further ado, let's get right into this video. Let me know if you guys like this type of content down below. So I will never forget one memory. Even in my old blood-clad, bombo-clad age, I will never forget when I was sitting on a bus going to church. As the Kenyan I am, how someone said, a friend of mine, mind you, Tanzanians, I'm looking at you. Here, buddy, come here. I'm gonna hold your hand with a napkin. She literally looks me dead in the face. Mind you, my boyfriend's also in this van. And she's like, the thing with you Kenyan women. I said, excuse me? Excuse you? Excuse me. Someone needs to be excused. She said, the thing with you Kenyan women is that you guys don't know how to treat a man. Not your man, a man. So basically, and she was like, for example, you. I said, not for example, me, honey. Said, for example, you, Paige, you are very focused on your studies to the point where I feel like your independence is not going to lead to marriage. Like, you're going to be so focused on your studies and so focused on getting yourself ahead that you forget that in your young years, you're supposed to also be looking for a mate, someone to partner with. And I was so gagged. I was so dumbfounded, flabbergasted. Hiyo ni kizungu imeenda shule. That's English that has gone to school. I was so shooketh because first of all, my boyfriend's in the same van. Second of all, you don't have a boyfriend. And third of all, the generalization of Kenyan women don't know how to keep a man, or Kenyan women can't get and keep a man, is honestly simply because Kenyan women have decided to break free of misogyny and misogyny. Kenyan women, a large scale across East Africa. I don't know if you guys have seen this, guys.
And who do you think you are raising your voice at?
I am sorry, baby. I didn't mean to shout. Mukwano nsonyiwa netonze. I didn't mean to shout. It was by badaraka. What do I say? I am sorry. Jamani, mwangu samahani, naomba msamaha, sikutarajia kupaza sauti yangu, jamani, nisamehe. Majirani mniamsha kwa sababu ni kama ninaota. Amiri mkuu wa majeshi yote, ukiongea ukipeana komanda ninafua kufuata, si ndio? Bila kuuliza swali. Pope Francis, nifanye aje? Nisujudu ama nifanye nini? Hapa ni mechi bwana. Ukifika 110 mimi ninasongeza 120. Volume lazima imatch. Ukirudi 0 mimi pia narudi 0. Siko class hapa ati nimekuja kusoma unanifundisha. Baba. Malaika Mikaeli, shuka chini. Urujue ground na kuna sema aje? Kunywa maji baba, relax, calm down, kunywa maji. Ala.
The guy basically shows the difference between Kenyan, Tanzanians, Ugandans, and this is from a woman perspective and how they respond to their husbands and criticism from their husbands or things that have to be done around the house. And it always portrays Kenyan women as these women who are just so hardcore and we're so and we don't give a damn about the man. But it's not that we don't give a damn about a man. It's that the man is not at the heartbeat of my existence. I would rather be known as someone who just doesn't take nonsense. But this also got me thinking. It started getting me thinking oh yeah, by the way, that is true. Kenyan women are very much regarded as independent. And I looked at it from the angle of what did we have to get independent from? Why is it across East Africa we said we must move on? Which led me down a serious rabbit hole at looking at how misogyny in Kenya started and where we are today, which is women becoming more independent and basically being very anti-misogyny, anti-patriarchy. And I decided to share what I have found on the beginnings of misogyny and how misogyny looks in Kenya with you guys here today. So first things first, we are going to define what is misogyny.
Misogyny is the belief that women are inferior to, less competent, and less valuable than men. These are behaviors or attitudes that stereotype women, having or showing a hatred of or prejudice to or of women.
Now, misogyny looks like women being told they shouldn't go to school or they don't have to go to school, and the family prioritizing taking or sending the boy child to school because they think that boy children will always come back and invest, which statistically is not true, because according to statistics and research, even in your own families, you see this. Women are less likely to abandon their parents after they get married. They always make sure even the person that they're marrying is very okay with taking care of their parents. Whereas men on the other side,
Man will leave you in the desert without water.
institutional misogyny looks like women not being given as much access to education as men. For example, if a man and a woman are put against to get a scholarship, then a man is more likely to get it. We'll get more into that later on in this video. Institutional misogyny at the tribal or cultural level looks like women being told that if the man dies and you guys don't have sons, you can't inherit anything. And someone who you has been married to your son for like 40 years plus, your son has gone and died. Now this lady is supposed to find herself where? Because she doesn't have sons. Those are all very typical examples of misogyny in different contexts and different places all across Kenya and all across the world. So prior to the arrival of colonialists, women played a very central part in society. The role of a man and role of a woman were very distinct. Women were seen as spiritual guides, but women were also seen as complementary to men, not as substitute, as complementary to men. So what does this mean? I'll give an example. Now, in the Bible, it's written that Adam came before Eve, and Eve was given as a gift to Adam. And for God to be able to create Eve, he took a rib from Adam and then created Eve. So this creates a hierarchy of man first, woman second. Man dominant, woman submissive. According to Christianity, which is what really influenced a lot of the colonialist rule and the colonialist mindset and ideology, women were secondary citizens, basically, who had to depend on men to survive and basically live. However, as I said, before our interaction with the Western world, this wasn't the case. I'll give an example with the Agikuyu tribe. Mumbi and Gikuyu were both created by God at the same time. They were put on different sides of Mount Kenya, and both of them were surviving just fine. They were doing just fine. And then the man decides he wants to go and meet the woman. He goes, meets the woman, and then they proceed to have 7 daughters after that. Just this example of the creation story demonstrates the way women were viewed in society. In the Kikuyu tribe, women were seen as equals, and if anything, they were seen as very capable of fending for themselves, and so were the men. And so when they came together, it was for the purpose of reproduction, which needed 2 equal parties to be able to do. Furthermore, when they reproduced, they didn't have sons. I hate to be the one. They did not have sons first, basically disbarring this idea that, oh my God, you need a son to be able to continue the family name. I'll also give an example with the Luo or the Western Nyanza peoples and how their women were treated. Women in that particular region were reported to actually act as not only spiritual guides, but to further go an extra step to act as generals during warfare. So for example, when your husband is going for war, it was very typical for the men to go and have conversations with their wives or have conversations with the women in the community, the senior women in the community, to ask for battle strategies and how they think that they can be able to overcome this issue, to overcome these people that were threatening their survival. And when the men left, they left with the mentality that my wife is well capable to be able to take care of the house, to be able to take care of the children, to be able to provide food. And they were not like worried and thinking, oh my God, she depends on me, she's so like a dove, how can I leave my dove? She's going to die. Now, I've just given a few examples because this video cannot be actually more than 30 minutes. We're taking the piss if we make it that long. Now, fast forward to colonial times. As I said, colonialism was largely influenced by Christianity and ideologies from the Bible. I'm a Christian myself, but I can also tell you that the hierarchy is usually God, man, wife, sometimes even children, and then wife. So children and wife can be interchanged. It depends who you ask. So this introduction of women being the submissive, women being the ones put down, was very much done so through our interaction with the Western world through colonialism. And it was demonstrated through the physical violence and sexual abuse that women went through during this time. Now, this is not to take away from the fact that the colonialists also inflicted serious and severe physical violence and abuse on the men. So that's not to take away from that. But for this video, I am largely focusing on basically the birth of misogyny and how we had women being treated as second-class citizens, particularly during the colonial era for this section. So during the colonial era, rape became a very serious tool of abuse from the colonialists to the women. And because rape prior to the interaction with colonialists was something that was so frowned upon, a lot of women were shunned in society. This shame led women to obviously make themselves smaller, reduce themselves, and also to start viewing themselves as property of the enslavers. And not just property of the enslavers, but also property of the men. Because during this time, really the best thing to be was a white man. The best thing to be was a white man. White men could rape and beat women. White men could rape and beat and impregnate women. And the African men that had previously been known to be their equals couldn't do anything. Now, this shame largely made the women shrink themselves, make themselves smaller, and ingrained into their minds, especially with the religious indoctrination during that time, ingrained into their minds that you are not equal to a man. You are smaller than a man. And mind you, while this is happening, right? While this is happening to the women, it's also being communicated to the men that woman is smaller than you. And they're also looking at the colonialists and how they treated their wives as smaller and submissive, and they dominated over not only them, the Africans and the Kenyans at that time, but they also, white men, dominated over the white women. And so I ask you, if you sit down for years on end, you see this white man is enjoying life, everything is going fantastic, he's raping everyone, raping women, women are now cowering and making themselves smaller to white men. And if you make yourself smaller in a society, you don't just do it for the white men. Now, because in your mind, you're trying to hide away from all men, because this violence is happening, yes, from a white man, but it's also from a man. So women became very, very sensitized to what can happen to you as a woman if you're seen to be disagreeable, if you're seen to be too loud, too out there, too independent. And as women are making themselves smaller and being taught to be smaller and being told that they're even better off being smaller, men are being trained that, yes, you're a black man, you're a slave, but a man is more important than a woman. And so if you take the equation of white plus man and you only have man, ladies and gentlemen, what do you have? You have a man in charge. He's not a white man, but he is a man. And so following colonialism and following our fight for independence, irrespective of the fact that a lot of our grandmothers, I know my grandmother personally, shout out to you, queen, love you. She personally went out and helped the effort. She would take food to people in the forest. She would get information to them during the Mau Mau movement and Mau Mau uprising that eventually led to Kenya's independence. During this time, irrespective of the fact that women put themselves at so much risk to be able to help the men, when the men took power, I told you, take away white, you put still man, they have been religiously indoctrinated to believe that they are more important than the women. And so now what do we have? We have the men in charge, the men making the decisions and prioritizing the familial values, but not in how we used to view them, but in the context of what they've been taught, which is what? As per the religious ideology, ladies and gentlemen, we have a patriarchy. Now, post-colonial Kenya saw a huge push to the idealistic familial structure where the man goes to work, the woman stays at home, she takes care of all the children, etc., etc. And so women during this time who wanted to be in politics, who wanted to contribute to the economy, it was looked upon like, okay, girl, but where are your kids? You were allowed to do these things once you were married. Marriage was the end-all, be-all for women. That was the step number one before you can begin living life. If you don't have a man, what are you doing? For example,
Grace Ogot.
she actually at one point became, I believe it was a member of parliament. She was an author and a literary scholar whose work was basically the best, among the best. If you're calling like top 10 African scholars, she might just be in there. And because of her literary success, she was nominated to be a member of parliament. And when she was even in parliament, people referred to her as the mother of parliament. Now, I want us to focus on this particular figure because a lot of you will argue that, look, what about her? What about her page? She was a woman. She was in the public view. This disproves that it was a patriarchal society, and this is where we began. I want us to take a pause and think about it. First of all, Grace was married. And like I said, during this time, you would be allowed to do what you want to do, but you have to be married. And you doing what you want to do has to be as a beacon for the other women. So you have to demonstrate to the other women that yes, you can be a successful literary person, but at the heart of it, you have to be a mother. Hence why her being referred to as the mother of parliament is actually an insult, but also an issue of branding, because women during this time were allowed to be in power, but only if they had finished and first off attach themselves as to a man as a mother and as a wife. And only when you do that is when you'll be seen in society in a positive light. If you don't do that, might as well, honestly speaking, if you don't do that, we saw Martha Karua. We saw what they did to her because she wasn't branding herself as a mother, as a wife. She was branding herself as a strong, independent woman, irrespective of an attachment to a man. And the consistent argument or the consistent insult to women like Martha Karua has always been, no one will ever marry you. No one wants to marry you. You're gonna die alone and sad. Don't threaten me with a good time. So what? So I shouldn't pursue myself because I'll die alone. Have y'all ever heard of family? Are you well? Anyway, like I said, during this time, it was the beginning of, yes, it was the beginning. But anyway, back to what I was saying. The introduction and the politics of the good woman and the bad woman started way before this point, but this is when it really starts shaping in Kenya specifically. Because remember, prior to this, we were just engaging with this from the lens of the white man. Now we have the actual black men in power, and they're still reinforcing these gender stereotypes that had been introduced through Christianity and colonialism. Good woman, you're married first and then you pursue what you want, but then also don't pursue too much because you still have to be a mom. So you can be a teacher, that's cool, you can be a lecturer, that's cool, but nothing too diabolical that's gonna strip you of the ability for us to see you as a mother and a wife. That must always be your revolving identity. And so naturally, the women didn't like this. These are women who have just helped you fight for independence. These are women who historically it's in their DNA to be equal, to be at par. And so we now start to see these politics of the good women and the bad women, particularly in the realm of media. Because you can't tell women who just helped you fight for independence, they need to sit over there and shut up. You can't do that, bud. It's not gonna work. And so with the introduction of media, we start really seeing men being pushed to the forefront. You'd barely really see women giving these powerful and moving speeches unless there was, you want someone to come and, get the two women together, get them together. We don't really want to, just to get the woman's vote. You know what I mean? Yeah. So anyway, we're going to fast forward to the era of telenovelas and actual media through TV. Now, during the media through TV, I know a lot of you watched the telenovelas that used to come on at 8. And when I tell you, I want to be the bad woman. If the bad woman always gets what she wants in the end, and the only thing wrong with her life is she didn't get a man, I fear I might be able to survive it. Because rise up, Queen Teresa. Teresa, come to the front. Teresa, come to the front. You're an icon. You're iconic. And I want you to know you taught a lot of Kenyan girls to break free from that mindset that you have to be so centered around a man to be able to be happy. Teresa used men. She was in relationships, but it was very useful. She aligned herself specifically with men with means, men with money. And she was not going to let herself be thrown under the bus for what? Because of love. She said, hell no. And I'm proud of that girl. Versus the politics of the good woman, someone like Paloma, who was always waiting for a man to come and save her, even though she went to school. Remember, the good woman goes to school. She's not uneducated. She goes to school, but she never really relies solely on herself to be able to pull herself out from the bootstraps. She's always pining after a man to be able to come and really add to her life. Whereas someone like Teresa, who is not educated, used her looks, used her cunning, and used her wiles, her feminine wiles, to be able to pull herself up by the bootstraps. And it was very clear that this distinction between the good woman and the bad woman was being drawn, especially when we look at also how women were treated in media, not just in the telenovelas, but we had women being slapped, Kidero, come to the front, and Shebesh. People slapping women in parliament and on official government grounds, and nothing happening. We saw this through our childhood and even through the telenovelas and the media that was being fed to us. This patriarchal society that had been started during colonialism was carried on even in the early 2000s. This is what we kept on seeing. And so now you're asking yourself, well, how did Kenyan women get to this point? How did Kenyan women go from allowing a women's rep being slapped on television, being slapped on government grounds, to really Kenyan women being known as the most disagreeable women in East Africa? And I really truly think there was a turning point when we started seeing figures like Martha Karua not giving a damn about being called, oh, you're unmarriageable, you're this, you're that. And in addition, we also got tired of being told we're never good enough. No matter what you do, if you go out as a woman and you're murdered, it's what was she doing there? What was she wearing? Why did she do this? Why did she do that? And there's a point it reaches where you just get so tired of being dehumanized that you just decide, you know what, maybe I am a bad woman. And a lot of people like to blame feminism when it comes to the case of Kenya. But feminism is not what is making women independent. Feminism is not what is making women not want to marry horrible, horrible men. Feminism is not what is making you men congregate on those spaces there, Andrew Kibe and them, having conversations about how horrible women are. Women are people who are going to love you. We want to love. We are very nurturing. But if a woman is not appreciated, that's where your problem begins. That is where your problem begins. And throughout this whole story that I have told you, there is not one point where women were appreciated. During colonialism, they were beaten and raped. And nobody did anything, understandably, because it was colonialism. But when there was an opportunity for something to be done, women were thrown in the back burner, irrespective of them putting their lives at risk to basically see this movement, this independence movement come to fruition. Women in the homes are expected to be breadwinners, etc., but still give credit to the man. And I think there was a point where Kenyan women reached and said no. And I think a marking point for that was really the My Dress, My Choice movement, when women came together and said, we're tired of being stripped, beaten, made to feel so small. And now it's even happening not only in our homes, but in our streets. And they said, to hell with it. And they decided the politics of a good woman and a bad woman, they'd rather be a bad woman. Because you know what? As Millie Odhiambo said, be a bad girl. Be a bad girl. She's a bad girl and she's in a corner office. Be a bad girl. Honestly, there's nothing good has ever been coming from being agreeable. If we were so agreeable, we would have laid down and taken colonialism and allowed that nonsense. But it's done. It's over. And you know what? More power to us. Wakanda forever. Wakanda forever. Anyway, thanks guys so much for watching this. And just a disclaimer, I really hope that the women who are on this channel, I am very, very aware that I have women from different parts of East Africa watching this channel. I love you all, but I'm gonna say, if you have this mentality that Kenyan women are disagreeable, I'll tell you what, that's your opinion. We're allowed to be proud of that. Bye guys, I'll see you next time.